Welcome to Trust Yourself, the podcast, the place where we learn that trust is earned and not given, even with ourselves. I'm your host, Betsy. I'm extraordinarily glad that you're here. Stick around. This is part one of How to Trust Your Gut and the Medical System. I want to give a gentle warning that we do talk about your guts and the things that come with it. I do make mention of having a parasite. I really don't get into too much graphic detail about things, but I promise you, if you listen to this entire podcast, and then, of course, part two, you will have the structure of what is needed for you to trust your gut and the medical system. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Trust Yourself. Happy to be back with you all today. I'm going to be sharing some stories about trusting my own body, gaslighting in the medical system, and the purpose of sharing these stories is to illustrate what the future can be as we learn to trust ourselves, we learn to trust our bodies, and therefore we can work as partners with the medical system. I don't want to get too heady into what has caused us to be where we are today, but I'll say sort of in a nutshell that we as humans have long been into a pattern of only trusting logic and not trusting our bodies or our intuition. And one of the primary teachings in Trust Yourself Intuition School, which is separate from the podcast, is that our intuition lives in our body. So just as pain is an indicator that something is wrong in your body, emotions are also letting us know. They're part of our emotional guidance system, aka intuition. And I'm happy to share that we as a culture, we as humanity, are starting to see what damage it has done with this quote-unquote lost art of intuition. The facts are numerous, including people's curiosity and acceptance of intuition. Short story, I was talking to someone the other day and I mentioned how I had an intuition school, and then he started to share about how he's reading a book all about Steve Jobs. And he said, Steve Jobs really valued intuition, and this man who's reading the book said that Steve Jobs said, no one teaches it in school, and so on. And I literally raised my hand and said, yep, I do. I have an intuition school. I do believe it's something that we would all benefit from if we were taught this from an early age. It's a misnomer to take this topic lightly or to sort of go from the distilled and wrong angle of we deserve things that happen to our body, or we cause them to happen to our body, and or that we have no control. So it's similar to how the law of attraction has been twisted by simplifying it in the forms of like the teachings of The Secret, which is just like, think of something and it will come, or you got cancer because you caused it, right? That will go horrifically wrong if you approach someone with any kind of health issue and just share with them, well, your body's trying to tell you something, or, you're missing something and that's what caused your illness. I don't recommend going from that angle at all, and we really do need to take ownership of our own selves and come to our own conclusions. So I just wanted to sort of give that little bit of PSA. This is going to be a two-parter. I'm going to be sharing on today's episode sort of a way to walk you into understanding how things have gone wrong from an example from my own life and how they can go right, which is a little bit of background. And then on a next episode, I will be sharing about a recent example of how trusting my own body and allowing myself, I'm going to say alternative means to figure out what's going on, but I don't mean alternative medicine. I don't mean ignoring Western medicine. I've said it on the show before, and I'll say it again. I believe that Western, Eastern, or Western and spiritual medicine can and need to work hand in hand in order for us to move forward, in order for us to heal, in order for us to fulfill our full potential and be healthy and happy individuals. And of course, as a collective. And also, as I mentioned, if the majority of people out there do not trust themselves, do not trust their body, do not understand themselves, and do not understand their emotional guidance system and their body as sharing intuitive information, then the doctors can't trust it. So, the tagline is, if you don't trust yourself, who will? Just think about that for a moment in the terms of this topic and all topics. If you do not trust yourself, how can you expect your family, your colleagues, your doctors, anyone else in the world to trust you? And of course we have, if you have trust issues with other people, it really means that you have trust issues within yourself. I've been there. Because you don't trust yourself enough to have the discernment to know who's trustworthy. And there's a lot of reasons why we may be in that position. I've been in that position, and I'm also not perfect. So let's get into how this all started, an easy way for me to explain to you what I'm talking about. So way back when Obama was president and he was proposing universal health care, the Affordable Care Act, which a lot of people will sort of blanketly refer to as Obamacare. In case you're not informed about it, Obamacare is basically slang for everyone being able to, quote unquote, afford health care. So if you sign up to receive affordable health care through the government or Obamacare, then you will have to choose an insurance company, different private insurances. You get to choose how much you want to pay, what services, what deductible, and all of that. Some of you may not have had to deal with that. Maybe you get insurance through your job or through your spouse's job or whatever it may be. But that's the breakdown. So you don't just sign up for Obamacare and you have it. One Obamacare or one universal health care. This is the way, and it's not universal health care, of course. It's quote-unquote affordable health care. So I don't know if you remember or not, but it took quite a while for Obama to really get this enacted. And we had been hearing about it for years. And a lot of people who wanted this to happen, I don't really have opinions either way about it, to be honest. I haven't given it enough thought to think about it. But people who really wanted this to happen, Obamacare to happen, were antsy for it to happen. So year after year, still working on it. It was during this time when we as the public we heard that it was coming out, and it was just delayed for many, many reasons, that I was at a family reunion. And at this family reunion, there was a second cousin once removed who was probably in her late 50s, early 60s from the South. And when I engaged in conversation with her, I asked her what she did, and she said that she works for the company, pretty high up in the company, that was hired to be put in charge of the financials for Obamacare, to take care of all of their financial needs. accounting and all of that. And what this woman shared with me at that time, again, they were working on it, putting it together. She said, there's this family doctor who everyone loves in our town down south. He's like one of those like late 70s family doctors who is still totally with it, absolutely loves what he does, and has serviced the community for decades, really. And every doctor pre-Obamacare, as things were starting to roll out and they were really gearing up to roll this new plan out, every doctor was given, handed down, okay, so this is the new protocol. Under this Affordable Care Act, this is what you can do and not do as a doctor. This is how you have to conduct your practice, your medical practice. So she was telling me this story about this doctor, and when he got these guidelines, he retired, and he regretfully retired. He had lots more vim and vigor. He was completely with it, and much to the dismay of all of the families that he was in charge of their care in his town, he retired, and he was really sad about it. I imagine he was probably bitter, but I didn't hear anything about that. I'm just sort of conjecturing there. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. What was going on? And she said, well, what he told me was, with having all of this protocol handed down, he knew immediately that he could no longer doctor, that he had to only use a flow chart. So he wasn't able to use his training. He wasn't able to use other resources or research, and he definitely was not able to use his intuition. So there were standardized tests for, if someone comes in with some type of ailment. Based on these ailments, you check the boxes, move on to the next yes or no. If it's yes, you give them this test. If that test is yes or no, you do this, just like a regular flow chart. And this upset him so much, his perception was he would no longer be able to do his job. Now, if what he said was true, and I have examples of what I experienced on the receiving end of that flow chart, which is what these episodes are nearly all about, if that's true, in my perception, we don't even need doctors. You can go to a vending machine. The vending machine can take your temperature, and the vending machine can follow the logarithm of, if you have a temperature, do these tests. If you don't have a temperature, do these tests, right? If you have these symptoms, you can just punch it in, and they can take your weight, they can take your blood pressure, and dispense or not dispense a treatment of any sort. I know that sounds extreme, but this is what the doctor perceived as well. So I'm just going to call it Obamacare. When Obamacare was enacted, and it's still the case today, everyone was meant to sign up if you weren't already receiving health insurance from your job or wherever else. If you didn't already have health insurance, the government mandated that you sign up for this health insurance. And if you didn't, then you had a penalty that you had to pay money in your taxes. And in the beginning, it was relatively small. I don't have the numbers. I'm sure you could look it up. And me and my partner at the time, we knew this background story from someone who was in charge of the finances in this family doctor story. We decided we were not going to opt in to the Affordable Health Care Act. We were going to go without insurance. Now, if that scares you and makes you, makes the blood run out of your face, that's okay. Like you and I are not necessarily, on opposite sides of the fence here. It just so happened that for the 7 or more years that I did not have health insurance, because by that point I had quit my social work job and I was full-time self-employed doing what I'm doing now. For those 7 years, I was in excellent health. I'm still in excellent health to this day. And in that 7 years without health insurance, I needed to go to the doctor, I'm just double checking, one time. And the one time that I needed to go to the doctor, I had a UTI. I also knew the metaphysical or spiritual or emotional reason that caused it. And I also know the physical reason that caused the UTI. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, a lot of people do know, but some people don't. UTIs untreated, or if you just are going to go drink cranberry juice or whatever it may be, UTIs gone untreated can actually be life-threatening. That's not hyperbolic. That infection can go up your urinary tract into your bladder, into your kidneys, and it can eventually, I think, go into your blood, and that's where it gets dangerous. So although it may seem more like an everyday thing or just a small thing, and a lot of times people will just drink cranberry juice and try to get rid of it that way. Yes, cranberry juice does help, without the sugar, by the way. It's still something that, in my mind, this is where the partnership happens, right? There are certain things that really are going to benefit from the medical system, from Western medicine. So when I got this UTI, I went to the urgent care, and by the time I got out of the urgent care and got the necessary antibiotics, I had a total bill of $300. So in 7 years, I spent $300. And one of the reasons why I didn't opt into the Affordable Health Care Act is because it was not affordable for me at the time. I actually looked into it before Obamacare, and it would be $300 a month for me as a self-employed person to get health insurance. And then I didn't even look into how much it was with Obamacare, but I just felt like, well, if doctors can't doctor, I'm very healthy, and there's the urgent care. Now, that does not cover, you know, tragic events, car accidents or whatever, like big medical issues. And, you know, you can get disaster insurance that covers that. I think there was a few years that I had that, but I can't remember exactly. So all in all, in that 7 years, I felt like, for me personally, I made the right decision, because I knew if I came into any other issue, a broken bone, some kind of weird headache, any kind of medical issue, that I knew there were affordable urgent care centers around New York City that I could go to and get the care that I needed. And that's what happened. I didn't have any medical emergencies or anything big. So when I moved to California, I don't know exactly how I had a change of heart. I think at that point, going 7 years without an annual physical, without a pap smear, all that kind of stuff, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get some health care through the Affordable Health Care Act, and, you know, just go to all the doctors and just get checkups. I didn't have anything wrong with me. You know, nothing that I knew of that I need to get checked out. And that's what I did. I got the health insurance in California, and I wound up getting a primary and getting a physical and going to the GYN and getting a checkup there, and all was well. And then what happened was I went on a retreat, and I had never experienced this before. Stay with me through the story, because it might seem a little weird. It did seem a little weird to me, but I'm glad it happened. So I went on this retreat, and while I was on this, it was a New Year's retreat. While I was on this New Year's retreat, it was in this like retreat house. There was the sister of the retreat leader who, as for a living, gave colonics. So colonics are where they clean out your intestines. So not to be too graphic about it, but they pump you full of water and then they flush you out. And it's something that I actually had gotten done previously when I was on a candida cleanse. That's something that they recommend doing, is cleaning out your intestines. I'd done it once. It's relatively uncomfortable. It was not painful for me, but so it goes. Many of you have gotten them before, I'm sure. So while I was at the retreat, they're like, oh, and by the way, you get a discount on colonics if you want them. And I just thought, honestly, I thought, well, that's weird. Like, I came for a retreat and you're offering me colonics. And they're like, we recommend, like, you can get as many as you want, but we recommend that you get 3. I think I was there for like 4 or 5 days. They're like, that's the recommended amount that you get is three different colonics on different days. And I was like, okay, well, I guess, when in Rome, I'm gonna do this. And I'm really happy that I did. What really actually convinced me, to be honest, is my bed was about 50 feet away from the colonic room. And it was not gross by any means. I mean, sleeping that close to a colonic room, it was very clean and you couldn't hear anything and it wasn't smelly, whatever. But the thing is after you get a colonic, sometimes you want to stay close to a bathroom. So I was like, well, that's cool. Like, I don't have to take a subway ride for an hour after getting a colonic and wonder if I'm going to, make it to the restroom. So I was like, this would be the time. I can just relax, take it easy. And even as a surprise to me, I signed up for 3 of them. So I get the first colonic, and it's a normal colonic. The woman was really good. She was really nice. She was really sweet, compassionate. And, in general, I like her. And then I think like a day or 2 later, I go in for my second colonic. And when you get a colonic, again, I don't think it's going to be too, it is a little graphic, but I'm not trying to shock you. It's just a part of the story. So when you get a colonic, there really is no smell because there's just a tube going out of you into the sewage system. So it's not messy, it doesn't go anywhere. And so while she was doing my second colonic, I'm basically cleaned out. And there's this very big tube of the water coming out of me. It's a clear tube. And she says, whoa, whoa, whoa. She's like, oh my gosh, take a look at this. And she shows me, with my own eyes, a roundworm. Different than ringworm. But it is a parasite that's in a circle shape. Yeah. Think of like the snake chasing its tail, right? So it's in that circle shape. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, wow, we don't usually get to see these, but yeah, you've got a parasite. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And she was like, yeah, you're going to need to get this taken care of once you're out of the retreat. So I got the third colonic. We didn't see anything else, but colonics don't get rid of parasites. They do clean you out, but they don't get rid of parasites. Interestingly enough, on my way to the airport, I got a ride from some people to the airport, and we all stopped for coffee at Whole Foods, and we were talking. And 2 of the people I was with, we just happened to all be in the same car or whatever, were doctors on this retreat. And I told them, I was like, oh my gosh, like this happened. And I think this is a New Year's retreat, and I had my annual physical like in a month from there. And they're like, oh my gosh, you have to go to the doctor like right away. And I was like, oh, it's all right. My physical's in like a month. And they're like, you really should not be waiting a month. You need to call them right away. And so that convinced me. Now, what I didn't tell you up until now, and that's because I was relatively unconscious about it. And I can't explain exactly why I was unconscious about this, which I'll share with you. But it's unlike me to be able to ignore something like this. So, again, I'm sorry we're talking about poop. But I am what I deem the world's greatest pooper. I'm regular. It just, every day at a certain time, it's fast, it's quick, it's clean, and I'm out. It's the right consistency, it's healthy, great. Well, for 6 years it had not been the case. And I had basically had diarrhea, like not like diarrhea like you have to be near a bathroom, but it was not solid, it was not healthy. The consistency was not right at all. It was basically liquid for 6 years. And when I got this information about the roundworm, I reflected and I was like, oh, Right. I went to the Dominican Republic 6 years ago, got Montezuma's revenge down there. I did get sick. I did drink the water by accident. Again, I think we wound up like refilling the store-bought water bottles with like the water that was in the cooler. Not the cooler, but like the water holder with the ice. You know, sometimes they put like cucumbers in it, and there's like a tap in the lobby, and there was ice in it. And so I wound up drinking a lot of that water, and I got really sick. And my bathroom experience had never been the same since. And again, from somebody who was like basically pretty proud of my regularity, it's a good sign of health. Even Oprah says so, of course. Talk to any dietitian. They'll be happy to talk to you about it. Being relatively unconscious about this, I was concerned about it for a couple of years. But honestly, I didn't have health insurance, and I didn't really feel like the medical system would be able to help me figure this out. Now, just knowing what you know now, you might think, well, you have a parasite, girl. Like, of course the Western medicine's going to take care of that for you. Well, listen to the rest. And by the way, I don't think we're going to be getting too graphic after this point. So if you need to take a break, I respect that. But we're not really going to be getting into too much about that. So I make an appointment with my primary right when I get back from the retreat, and I tell her what happened. You know, I went on the retreat, I got a colonic, I saw the worm with my own two eyes. It was a clear tube of water, and out came a worm. And the shock on her face, I mean, she was so concerned, so surprised, and, you know, grossed out a little bit, but doctors generally don't get grossed out that easy. But she was shocked and concerned. And I was like, yeah, like let's take care of this. And by that point, I'd already done some research on the internet and knew exactly what medication took care of roundworm. And I had also dated somebody who was in the middle of a lawsuit with the government because he was in the military and he was dosed with, I think, an anti-malaria drug. And sometimes that anti-malaria drug was combined with the other drug for roundworm, and he had permanent neurological damage from it. He's of Mexican descent, and so Latinas are more susceptible to permanent nerve damage from that drug. So I knew exactly what to get, what not to get. It was prescription only. So I went to the doctor, told her the story, and I was like, yeah, so I need this drug to get rid of it. And she's like, okay, great. So we're going to do a stool sample, and they're going to analyze it. And I was like, okay. I mean, that's standard practice, something I would completely expect, even though I saw it with my own two eyes and had these symptoms for 6 years. So I said to her right there and then, I said, okay, well, what if the stool sample comes back normal? Now, let's pause here and give a little bit more information. So I do run in spiritual leadership circles, which means not a brag, just a fact. I'm friends with a lot of spiritual influencers, spiritual teachers with wide audiences, large platforms. And I won't name any names, but within the 6 months before this retreat, two of them that I was most close with, they weren't friends, but I was friends with both of them. One of them, she was like, and she actually, okay, we're going to call them friend A and friend B. So friend A came to me and said that my acquaintance, which was A's friend, discovered she had a parasite. And the only way that she discovered, she felt something was wrong in her digestion, in her body, and Western medicine didn't detect it, and that my friend A thought maybe she had a parasite. And so she said that she went to a medical doctor, a Western medical doctor, but someone that was not covered by insurance and was $500 an hour, and sent her sample to, there's like only one place in the country that analyzes it in such a minute way that catches things. and I don't really know the details about it, thank God, because I told you we weren't going to get into details, but that the regular, let's just even say in this case, I don't know what it was before, but the regular Obamacare tests for the samples don't catch it. So my friend A learned from my acquaintance, which was her friend, and she went to the expensive doctor who sent it to the very, very special lab. And it came back, indeed, she had parasites. And it wasn't roundworm, but she had parasites, and she had to go through a whole bunch of meds and dietary protocol to get rid of it. It took her months. Well, then a few months later, my unrelated, except for our jobs, friend B came to me and said, I think I have parasites. And basically went through the same story. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Now, I'm not a person pretty much at all that I think there's a phrase for this, but like, you know, paranoia or whatever, where like someone's like, oh, I think I have this, and I'm like, oh, I think I have that too. Like, I'm not a person like that. But when I saw it with my own eyes, put two and two together, what had been happening for me for the past 6 years, I thought to myself, oh, wow, like, yeah, I have one too. And I know enough now from my background that these tests might not catch it. So that's why in the moment, on my very first doctor visit, I went and I told my doctor, I was like, well, what happens if the tests come back clean? And she said, well, then I can't give you the medicine. And then she said, well, then we'll contest it. So we'll bring it back to the insurance and we'll contest it. And I said, okay, well, what happens if we get denied? And she said, well, then I can't give you the medicine. So I gave the samples, and the samples said that I was completely healthy. So don't, ignore what's been happening to you in the bathroom for 6 years. Ignore the worm that you saw with your own two eyes. Ignore the man behind the curtain. You're healthy. Now, we all know that I was not healthy, that there was a problem. So she contested it, denied. Now, first of all, I want to say I really loved and respected this doctor. I had zero issues with her. I knew, because of what I already told you, that she was working with a flow chart and that her hands were tied, and that she didn't explicitly tell me that, but she implicitly told me that. I mean, well, she kind of did explicitly tell me. She said, I can't give you the drug. Let's harken back to that doctor who retired, right? Any logical, sane person would hear my symptoms, would hear the trip I went on, would hear what I saw with my own two eyes with a professional colonic person who also knows what they're doing and knows what they're seeing, and would say, yeah, you need this drug, or, an alternative way. There are herbs and you can starve it, and that takes a really, really long time. It's like harder than killing candida. So there are ways you can do it. So she contested it and it got denied. So I was denied the medicine. She sent me home. And on the chart, it said I was healthy. Meanwhile, I was still having basically liquid in all forms when I was in the bathroom. So I went on the quote-unquote black market, otherwise known as Etsy, or eBay. I don't remember which one. I think I got them from both. And there was someone in Texas who was selling the exact drug that I needed from Mexico. So it was all in Spanish. I had to translate it. And so I ordered it, and of course it was marked up tremendously. I ordered 2 doses, and immediately, so I took one day and I took one the next day, immediately I went back to the greatest pooper on earth after 6 years. Well, about a month went by and it came back. And I did some more research online, and it was like, yeah, for chronic cases, I believe it said you needed like 6 or 7 doses. So I ordered some more. It was hard because, yeah, it was literally the black market. Like, this is an illegal way to gain access to this drug. I'm hearing like a little birdie in my ear just mentioning like abortion pills and how basically that's how you have to get them in some places illegally. There are ways, people. There are ways. So I ordered like the 6 or 7 doses, whatever it was, and I haven't had a problem since. I'm back to my regular old self, no side effects. I avoided that other drug that causes permanent nerve damage, or at least did in my ex. And when I went back for my checkup, I told this doctor the story. I said, you know what, I'm healed. She said, well, how did you do it? I said, I went on the black market and got those pills. You know what her response was? She gave me a big old smile and said, good for you. Now, in the world we live in today, that sounds incredibly backwards to me. If I did not have all of this background. So there is something in between there, this little detail. And so while we were contesting the results so that I could get the drugs legally, I was calling into the office and I would get the nurse online, like the nurse that was in the office. And, they would convey the message to the doctor. And the first time I got the nurse on the call, I said, well, what happens if it's denied? And she said, well, then we can't give you the medicine. And she said, quote, they won't allow it. And then that's all I got. And so then I hung up the phone and I started to think, like, who's the they? They won't allow it. Who's they? Now, at this point, I knew. And here's a really important side note. And I'm not blaming the doctors. In fact, I have compassion, and I feel a little bit bad for the doctors because we have presumably this white family doctor in his 70s. I don't officially know he's white, but I would guess. This white doctor in the South who had been doctoring for decades retires because he can't doctor. Well, as soon as I signed up for Obamacare in California, every single one of my doctors was an immigrant, like straight up immigrant. And I loved them. They were all awesome. I did have this one GYN that I switched because I wasn't into her, but I don't even think she was an immigrant. I had a Chinese doctor, not Chinese medicine, but someone from China. My primary care, I believe, was from India. I don't remember where everyone else was from, but if they didn't follow the flow chart, they wouldn't have their jobs, and they wouldn't be able to stay in the country. So I don't exactly regret what I did, but I started to think, who's a they? Who's a they? I want to track this down. I got for half a second, I got to be an investigative reporter. Did not get very far, and it just didn't feel right for me and good for me to keep pursuing it. It's not my background, investigative reporting. So I called back, and I finally got that nurse on the phone again to ask her who the they was. They won't allow it. And I got her on the phone, and she got really agitated with me when I asked her. And she actually gaslit me and straight up lied and said she never said that. She never said the word they. She completely denied it. So I'm not saying that there's some big cover-up, people. I'm just saying that it's really messed up. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm really glad that I trusted myself. My doctor said that she was really glad that I trusted myself and that I got healed through illegal Western medicine, which would have been legal if I had a prescription for it, but for some reason the test said I was healthy. So I trusted myself through that, and I got what I needed. On our next episode, we'll be hearkening back to these stories and the origins of doctors can't doctor, they just have a flow chart. And there's more proof of that with what I'll share in my experience with catabolic distress over this winter. And just to let you know, I'm doing just fine. I am very healthy. I do have my struggles. I'm still very isolated due to the loss of my family. And I'm still getting back on my feet. But in terms of medical, I have doctors and therapists and psychiatrists and all that jazz. So I have my care team. But we're going to be talking about what happened when I trusted my body, I trusted myself, went to the doctor here in New York, and got gaslit severely. And how, because my condition wasn't on the flow chart, it wasn't even documented or taken care of. All in the name of lining up for you what it takes for you to maintain your health. It can be done. If you have a little feeling inside of yourself and you know how to trust it, then you can persevere with tenacity and get the help you need so that you can be healthy, you can be healed. Just as a side note, I've even heard some of my favorite comedians / podcasters talk about, going into surgery and feeling uneasy with the way they were treated and actually walking out before they get the surgery because the people didn't have their stuff together. And you need to have your stuff together before you get surgery. And those people are admittedly very privileged. But they talk about their fear of advocating for themselves, for upsetting other people, upsetting people in power, upsetting the medical industry, upsetting insurance or doctors. So it does get easier with time. And when I talk about trusting yourself, in case you didn't know, intuition is a language. And although it's unique to you and your emotions in your body, it can be taught. So when I tell people I have an intuition cool, I like that. When I tell people, I have a Trust Yourself intuition school, and I teach people how to trust their intuition, the most common response I get is like, oh, that's really hard. Trusting your intuition, getting in tune with that is really hard. And they'll sort of say what their difficulty is. It's confusing, or there's distractions, or they don't know what to tune into, or whatever. And my response to them is, well, if you wanted to learn a foreign language, let's say French, and you didn't know it, what would you do? And they're like, go to school, get a teacher, and practice. Same thing with intuition. There's more misnomers and misinformation about intuition than there are about learning French. I think we all know that. So many myths about what it is and what it isn't. And for years in readings, people would come to me and they'd be like, I knew that this romantic partner was for me. How did the star, I felt it so strongly. How did the stars get it so wrong? It's like, no, the stars didn't get so wrong. You just didn't know how to speak the language. You were misinformed. So I do have a free class out there called How to Trust Your Intuition Without Second Guessing in the Face of Fear, Doubt, and Uncertainty. Arguably, there's more uncertainty in the world today than there ever was. And that goes hand in hand with all the previous episodes that I was talking about with narcissism and controlling and gaslighting relationships. Because only you can stop narcissism. You cannot change a narcissist. You cannot control them, but you can change, and you can control yourself. And one by one, when we stop being enablers and we stand up for ourselves and have healthy boundaries and trust ourselves, and therefore we know how we have the discernment to know who's trustworthy, that's when the world changes. That's when you can compassionately, or if you need to, assertively, speak up to your doctors. That's when you can go get a second opinion and know who you can trust. That's where if you know something is wrong with your body and the doctors are telling you you're fine, you can find a way or the means or the people to help you. And even in legislation these days, that's what they're pushing us towards. This is not a political show. It's just true. If you have something growing in your body and you don't want it to be there, you might have to go on the black market to get something. You might have to go to another state. And you're going to need to trust yourself through that journey and know who's trustworthy for sure. So next week we're going to have another story on this, and the next story really has led me to a place where I was stuck in this place where I would figure out what was going on with me, heal myself, take necessary actions to not be suffering from whatever it was, and then even though there was literally no friends or family saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm concerned for you, you should see a doctor," I still heard those voices in my head. It could be akin to guilt. So I had this like phantom guilt around of like, I should see a doctor. So I would. I went to the doctor, and you'll get to hear what happened about that next time. So thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you for your ratings and your reviews and your subscriptions. And if you are ready to trust yourself, maybe it's time to go to school. I've been teaching for over a decade, and it would be a joy to have you. So to check it out, what it's all about, just go on my website, betsylefay.com, and check out that free class, How to Trust Yourself Without Second Guessing in the Face of Fear, Doubt, and Uncertainty. This episode of Trust Yourself, the podcast, is created, written, and produced by me, your host, Betsy LeFay. Music provided by the amazing and generous Ben Talmi. Thanks, Ben. If you'd like to find out more about me and my work, and specifically how you can trust your intuition, head over to betsylefay.com. Thanks again for being here. See you next time. Oh yeah, and if you like the show, please subscribe and give us a review. It's one of the best ways to help us get the word out to other people like you. Of course, if you know anyone else that would find this podcast helpful, pass it along to them. Sharing is caring.